This video is lesson 23 of the Hands-on Equations learning system. And in this lesson, you will subtract a multiple of a parenthetical expression. So really what we're looking at is very similar to what we did in lesson 22, except now we're going to be including subtraction along with our parenthetical expressions. So here's our first example. X minus 2 times the quantity star plus 2, and that equals 5. Now the setup for this problem is probably the most complicated that we've seen so far, because when we start setting it up, we have an x, and then we need to subtract a whole bunch of things right here. And in this case, when we're subtracting a whole bunch right here, I find it easier to go ahead and use the distributive property rather than just looking in the parentheses and trying to subtract star plus 2 twice. You could do it either way, but I prefer to go ahead and distribute this 2 to both terms in the parentheses, so we have 2 stars and then 2 2's, which is 4. And then all of this stuff, this entire expression right here, that's what we're trying to subtract from x. And obviously we can't take 2 star plus 4 away from x when we don't even have 2 stars or 4. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go ahead and put 2 stars and 4, but I really can't just add that on there. The only way I can add that on there is by adding a 0 pair. So when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 x's and a negative 4. So what I just did is I just added nothing to the left-hand side of the equation, because this is a 0 pair, it's worth nothing. This is a 0 pair, it's worth nothing. And this is a 0 pair. Now I can remove 2 stars and a 4. So I'm going to remove 2 stars and a 4. And now I've completed the left-hand side of my setup. The right-hand side is just a 5. And now we're ready to use legal moves to solve our equation. I want to get rid of this 4 that's on the left-hand side, the negative 4 that's on the left-hand side. To do that, I'm going to add a positive 4 to each side, and that'll create a 0 pair on the left-hand side, which I then can remove. So now I have 3x equals 9. 3 times what is 9? 3 times 3 is 9, which makes star be negative 3. When we complete our check, we want to go back to our original setup. And I'm going to set this up a little bit differently just to show you a different way. When we're doing our setup, we definitely need to put an x, but then we want to subtract all of this stuff. I could have gone to the parentheses and said, I need to subtract star plus 2 twice. So I could have gone here and I said, okay, I need to subtract star plus 2. And obviously I can't just put that on there, so I'm going to make a 0 pair. But I need to subtract that twice, so I need to do another version. And here's another star plus 2, and here's its 0 pair. So this is exactly what I did before, except what I did before is I just combined this to 2 stars and 4, my 2 stars and 4. I did it all in one step. So now I'm ready to subtract my star plus 2 twice. So star plus 2, and then twice, star plus 2. So now I've got my setup on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side we just have a positive 5. The x's were each worth 3. So on the left-hand side we have 9, and then we're canceling out 4 of those because of the negatives. So 9 and then cancel out 4 leaves us with 5 positives. And of course on the right we have 5 positives, so our check is 5 equals 5. And here's another example, and in this example we're probably going to have the most challenging setup we've had so far, because we have a large expression that we're going to have to subtract twice. So when we start setting this up, we have a star, and now we're subtracting a whole bunch of things that we don't have. So one way that you can do this is you can go ahead and do use your distributive property and distribute the 2 to everything in the parentheses, to each term. And then we have 2 times 3x's, which is 6x, and then 2 to the 1's, which is 2. So we're trying to remove 6 x's and 2 positives from the left-hand side. Well, we don't even have any of those. So I know I'm going to have to add 6 x's and 2 positives. We have to kind of stack these. 3, 4, 5, 6. and then 2 positives. I know I'm going to have to remove all of that, but I can't just add those without adding 0 pairs. So I'm going to put a 0 pair for each one. These are just going to have to be kind of stacked. And a -2 for a 0 pair with the +2. Now I can start removing my 6x plus 2. So 1, 2, 3, let me move these out of the way, 4, 5, 6 x's, and remove my 2. And what I'm left with is all 6 of these stars and the -2. And you may notice that what we really just did is after we applied the distributive property and distributed this 2 to each term that's in the parentheses, we wanted to remove 6 x's and a +2, and what we ended up adding was 6 negative x's, otherwise known as 6 stars, and a -2. And the reason for that is that in order to remove this, we had to add a pair of the opposite of this. Then once we removed this, all that was left was that pair of the opposite. And now to complete our setup on the right-hand side, we have a star and a -8. Now we're ready to use our legal moves to solve the equation. And I think I'm going to remove a star from each side and then a -2 from each side. If I take -2 away from 8, I'm left with -6. So now what I have left is 6 stars equals -6. So I'm asking myself, what times 6 equals -6? And that would have to be -1. So star is equal to -1, which makes x +1. Let me set this up in a slightly different way for the check, just so you can see 2 different methods. Starting out with star, and then we're trying to subtract 2 of that expression 3x plus 1. So if I go ahead and add 3x plus 1, 1, 2, 3 x's, and a 1, and do that as a 0 pair, I can then remove one of those expressions, and then I'm going to have to do it again. So let's remove one of those 3x plus 1s. 1, 2, 3 plus 1, and then I'd have to do it again. Well, when I do it again, I know I'm going to end up with exactly the same thing. So what I can do is just double what I had. And there we go. There's our original setup. And then on the right-hand side, a star and a -8. Star had a value of -1, so it looks like I'm just going to have a whole bunch of negatives over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And on the right-hand side, we have -8 and -1, which is also -9. So we have -9 equals -9. So when you're setting up these more complicated equations that involve subtracting a multiple of a parenthetical expression, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can use the distributive property to distribute that multiple into the expression and then go ahead and just set that up, use a 0 pair and then remove that. Or you can set up what's in the parentheses using a 0 pair, and then you can just remove that expression and then double it or triple it depending on what the multiple tells you to do.